Hi guys, so today we're going to be going through some brand new polling data that's come out in the past days and pretty much in the past of this week. So we're going to be going through three particular polls. These will be focused on the Democratic primary instead of the general election itself. So we're not going to be going through these sort of polls with uh, this kind of polling where uh, there are it's kind of a general election. We're just going to be going through Democratic primary polling. So, firstly, I want to start off with South Carolina since we haven't gotten many credible polls from there yet. And the mainstream media has been pushing that Kamala Harris has a very good chance to win South Carolina if Joe Biden doesn't run. And they're saying that, oh, Kamala Harris, she'll come in second to Joe Biden if he runs. But we can see from here, Kamala Harris is coming in at a distant third place behind Joe Biden with 37% of the vote and Bernie Sanders with 21% of that Democratic primary vote in South Carolina. So, South Carolina, African Americans are key to winning the Democratic primary in that state. And it's going to be interesting to see how the candidates perform in areas like South Carolina. We can see that the establishment support is very strong in the South Carolina Democratic primary, with Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Beto O'Rourke all coming in within striking distance to take that Democratic primary in South Carolina. And we can see progressive candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, Sherrod Brown, Pete Buttigieg, and with the exception of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they don't seem to be performing as well compared with the, national stage. And that's not surprising because Clinton absolutely demolished Sanders in the 2016 primary. But what's interesting is that Bernie Sanders is roughly keeping about the same amount of support in South Carolina as he did in 2016, and that's pretty interesting because in 2016 he got demolished by about a 3-1 margin. He got about it was about 75-25. Sanders now with 21% of the vote. So yes, that's pretty interesting to also note. If we go ahead and look at some of the details here, we can see Biden 37, Sanders 21, Harris 9, Cory Booker 6, O'Rourke 5, Warren 5. And if we go into the actual ages of these people, in the 18 to 34 age bracket, of course, Sanders absolutely demolishing the crowd here. He claims 40% of the vote, then 23 for Biden and 9 for Kamala Harris. If we take it up to 35 to 54-year-olds, 36% for Biden, 15 for Senator Sanders. Harris and O'Rourke both have 6%. 55 to 74, we can see that 47% for Biden, 14% for Harris, 13% for Sanders. And of course, Biden doing the best with oldest voters, 64% for Biden, Harris at 9%, Booker at 8%. And you can see they've gone over here and said, it appears Harris has some work to do in South Carolina, particularly within the African American community. Among African American Democratic primary voters, Biden leads with 43% of the vote. Sanders captures 15% of the vote, with Harris at 9 and Booker at 7. That is very surprising to me. The two people who are the white men in this case, they have the strongest support among the African American community. That's very surprising. And Harris has the same amount of support, 9%, as she does with everyone else. I mean, by the time maybe her name recognition increase, etc. But Professor Spence, blah blah blah. This issue is not helping Harris. That they're talking about reparations there. We're not going to go through that one because it's not really important right now. But yes, so that's the South Carolina poll. Overall takeaways: great news for Joe Biden leading the pack there. Kamala Harris definitely underperforming where she should be in an African American state like South Carolina. So that would be my overall takeaway. Joe Biden doing well and Kamala Harris doing quite poorly. So I think for each one of these polls, I'm going to say what I think is the biggest winner, biggest loser. So it's not biggest loser, not people like Julian Castro, because we already know that people like them won't win the primary. It's kind of within this the few people who actually have a chance of winning the primary: Biden, Sanders, Harris, Booker, Warren, O'Rourke, and then it kind of drops off from there. But yes, I would agree. Biggest winner here, definitely Joe Biden. Biggest loser would be Kamala Harris. If we go ahead and now take a look at the New Hampshire Democratic primary, we can see Bernie Sanders takes the early lead in the New Hampshire Democratic primary. We won't take a look at the U.S. Senate race today, but that's a very interesting case there. I would have thought that Senator Jeanne Shaheen would be quite a safe bet to go on for re-election, but we can see that a very tight race with Governor Sununu if that were to be the case. So New Hampshire 2020 Democratic ballot test, we can see Bernie Sanders leading the pack with 27%. Joe Biden coming in second place, a very close second with 25% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 12% of the vote. Again, this shocks me. Why is Kamala Harris at a lower vote total in South Carolina than she is in New Hampshire? That shocks me. Elizabeth Warren at 9%, Amy Klobuchar at 8%, O'Rourke at 5%, Booker at 5%, and then it starts to drop off from there. So, New Hampshire, interesting state. I would have definitely thought that Bernie Sanders could have done much better in this 2020 poll. I guess you do have those Elizabeth Warrens, those Beto O'Rourke's, those Pete Buttigieg's, those Sherrod Browns, those Tulsi Gabbards, somewhat defecting from Bernie Sanders. But again, Bernie Sanders has a very, very committed core base of supporters. And it is quite surprising that he's not performing better than he is right now. But again, in 2016, he started off as a complete underdog. He was losing in New Hampshire at this point, but then at the end he went on to decimate Clinton. But that was mainly because of his name recognition. Now he has overwhelming name recognition, so definitely underperforming there from Mr. Sanders. Joe Biden, 25% of the vote. That seems pretty good. We can see there. If we go ahead and take a look at the at this poll, right, no other candidate clears the double digits other than those top three: Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. Among voters aged 18 to 34, Bernie Sanders has a large lead with 44% of the vote, Joe Biden at 11%, Elizabeth Warren at 9%, and Kamala Harris is tied with Beto O'Rourke at 8%. This also somewhat surprises me. Everyone is saying that Beto O'Rourke will really dig into that core base of Sanders supporters, but at this point, I can't see where that is. Right now, Beto O'Rourke is barely above where he is in the overall test with the with this one, and we can see that O'Rourke 8%. That's not really much above that 5% that he's getting in the overall polls. So I don't really agree with this narrative that Beto O'Rourke is really digging in to those core base of Sanders supporters. Of course, older voters supporting Biden, then Sanders, then Harris. Klobuchar takes 10%, which is pretty interesting. And yeah, again, that's pretty interesting. We won't go through these two, but yeah, that's pretty much it. If we go ahead and take a look at the biggest winner, biggest loser, I would probably say Kamala Harris is the biggest winner in New Hampshire, according to this recent poll. Just because, again, this is a very white state, and you can see she's in the hunt there with that one. I'm going to say that biggest loser here, Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke. Because Beto O'Rourke, we've seen him triumph in Texas, but his momentum has really stalled at this point. So that's it there. So taking a look at this poll we have from the Morning Consult, a fine poll. If we take a look here, what they see as their key takeaways, I would agree with most of these. So Sanders jumps following his campaign announcement. Bernie Sanders has moved from 21% to 27%, representing the largest single week shift for a candidate so far. Again, good news for Sanders there, but again, he is underperforming his 2016 numbers. However, one could make the argument that again, that again, so many more candidates, and I would agree with that narrative. Biden's support looks stronger than Sanders. 51% of Democratic voters indicate that Biden is one of their top choices, whereas 38% say the same about Sanders. That's interesting. I wouldn't put too much weight into that as much as this one, because again, it's not a ranked choice voting. It's the actual it's who people vote for. It's first past the post in all of these ones. Joe Biden remains in front. Joe Biden receives 29% of the vote, followed by Bernie Sanders, who received 27%, and Kamala Harris with 10%. Fourthly, Biden's age gap. That's pretty predictable. I don't really think we need to cover that too much. So this is among all Democratic primary voters. We can see Bernie Sanders closing in on Biden. We can see this is the change. Biden has dropped by 1. He was at 30, now he's at 29. Sanders gaining 6 points. That's pretty impressive. And then Harris, Warren, O'Rourke, and Booker all losing a point. And then it kind of slips off from there. So again, pretty interesting in the all Democratic primary voters. Just one more thing about this. We can see that Bernie Sanders with 27%, again underperforming his 2016 numbers, but if many of these candidates had run for president before, they would probably get more votes than they would do now. So next one, who's leading the Democratic primary? Among Democratic primary voters in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. Again, even with his poor showing in South Carolina, Bernie Sanders still gaining much ground there. So another interest, I found this very, very surprising. Insanely surprising who the Democratic voters' second choice is. So if let's say someone like O'Rourke doesn't run, these would be the candidates who would benefit from that particular person not running. So let's first start off with Biden. This surprised me a lot. Sanders is Biden's second choice, and then followed by Harris and Warren. I can understand Harris, but Sanders coming in as Biden's second choice voters among Biden voters, that absolutely shocks me. Biden is a moderate, centrist Democrat under the Obama years, pretty much the opposite of Bernie Sanders, other than their demographics. But Joe Biden, second choice, Bernie Sanders, I just cannot get that, because Biden voters are, we can see in this same poll, if we go into the age gap, Joe Biden, look, he gets 40% among the oldest voters, 17% among the youngest voters, and that shocks me that Sanders gets the most of Biden's second choice votes. Harris at 12%, yeah, that doesn't really surprise me. Again, another establishment moderates in Harris. Warren, again, somewhat surprises me given that she is on the far left wing of the Democratic primary. If we go ahead and look at Sanders' vote, 27%. Again, this also surprised me. I would have thought that Warren would be Sanders' second choice, but no, it's Joe Biden, which surprises me that Bernie Sanders voters, given they're young, they're energetic, that they would go for someone like a Joe Biden. That surprises me. Warren doesn't really surprise me. The Harris, I mean, maybe with the younger voter thing, but that still is quite surprising to me. I would have thought in Sanders' top three, the first one would be Warren, secondly, Beto O'Rourke, and thirdly, maybe someone else on this list, maybe someone like I don't know, Tulsi Gabbard, a Pete Buttigieg, people like that, which somewhat surprises me. In Harris, Biden coming in at Harris's second choice of voters, that does not surprise me. But Bernie Sanders coming in second, that surprises me quite a lot, that Kamala Harris voters would go to Bernie Sanders and then Elizabeth Warren. Not too shocking there. In Beto O'Rourke, Sanders and Biden and Harris, this is not surprising to me at all. Bernie Sanders because of O'Rourke's young base, Joe Biden because of O'Rourke's positions as a more establishment moderate, and Harris again because of those positions, and also Harris's age more in line with O'Rourke's than Sanders and or Biden. And finally, Elizabeth Warren, no surprise that her voters would go for Bernie Sanders, followed by someone like a Joe Biden, which also surprises me. Same thing with Kamala Harris. So a lot of shockers here in these second choice voters, but it doesn't look like they're going to matter that much in the end. I mean, all four of these most of these candidates have already announced, those being Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren. Beto O'Rourke says he will make an announcement about the announcement soon, but it looks like he's going to run as well. So again, this might not matter too much given all the front runners are jumping into the race. Who's leading the Democratic primary? Again, Sanders coming up, Klobuchar also coming up, Elizabeth Warren stagnant there, Cory Booker coming up, Kamala Harris is up, and then all of these other candidates, Gillibrand, Castro, Gabbard, Buttigieg, Warren, not seeing much of an effect from their announcements. So Biden versus Sanders, we can see Bernie Sanders here. He is one of my top choices among the Democrats, and I would gladly support him in the primary. I have a favorable opinion of him, but I would prefer if the Democrats nominated someone else. You can see that is his numbers, and then I would vote for him over President Trump, but would be disappointed if he was the Democratic nominee, and then I would be unlikely to support him under any circumstances. So we can see Joe Biden has a stronger support among there compared to Bernie Sanders, and then that's in the GOP primary, which I'm not going to cover because it's unlikely President Trump will receive a serious challenge there. So that's it for today's video, a very long video today, but I thought it was very important to discuss these recent polls that have been coming out. And perhaps tomorrow I'm going to do a video discussing some of the general election polling that we've been seeing from some of these front-runner candidates. Another announcement I have to make, from now until quite a while, from now until the first Democratic debate, which is in June, I have a major announcement to make. I'm going to make this announcement in my next video about this whole Democratic primary and how I'm going to be covering it, how I'm going to be addressing it, and when you're going to see videos about the Democratic primary, because it's going to be a lot of fighting between these Democrats. So that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Comment down your suggestions below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.